Hey everyone, assalamu alaikum, welcome back to my channel, and if you're new here, a really big welcome. So I'm going to be honest with you, first of all, if this is the first time you've come to my channel and you're just on this video to hear about this book, then I'll leave a timestamp here to where I get started. This is more for like my audience who always, normally follow me. This is the first time I'm doing a video like this. You guys know I don't really stick to one topic on my channel. I like to have a bit of a mix of everything, and my mum actually gave me the idea to go a little bit deeper into the books I've been reading recently. I am sure like many of you guys have always had this intention to read more at the start of every single year, and to be honest, it's only due to the pandemic this year that I actually took a pause with life and started reading a bit more, and it was so good to pick up a book and read it from start to finish. Although this did take me a while to read, but it wasn't because it was a difficult book to read, it was more because I enjoyed it so much, but I will get into that in a minute. Honestly, the primary reason why I've gone back to reading, which used to be like my biggest hobby, I used to always be found with my head in a book. I used to love the Famous Five, Harry Potter books, Secret Seven, Enid Blyton, The Fiery Tree. Like, I used to love reading the Jack Wilson books, the Roald Dahl books. As a child, like, reading was my favourite thing to do. I used to go to the library a lot. It was a big hobby of mine, and then obviously as you grow up, you start like studying, you start having exams, you just get distracted, then obviously social media, blah 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 blah. So I just wanted to bring it back into my life, and honestly it's been the biggest solace for me, the biggest source of comfort, because I, for a very long time, struggled to sleep. Like, really struggled, especially on the days when it came to working. I think part of it was because of a very messed up routine due to the pandemic, but part of it was probably like bits of anxiety and just a restless mind, and yeah, I was really having a horrible time sleeping, to the point where I was even considering ordering melatonin online from iHerb to try and, get some hormones into my body that would just help me relax and sleep. And luckily I didn't do that. Luckily I really did a bit more research into what are some of the ways to help you sleep, and one of them is actually reading. And I was thinking, well, no, I don't think so, because then I'd be so caught up into a story that, my mind wouldn't be able to stop. But actually what happens is that you get transported away from your own life, and you're immersed in someone else's life, or into another story, or into a different person's voice, because whether it's a fiction or non-fiction, but you're reading someone else's point of view or opinion, or you're learning something, and then you do start to feel your mind slowly being absorbed into that, and then like the rest of your mind, I feel like the rest of the parts in your head can just start to shut down. And it's actually worked a treat. I can't believe how much it's helped me to get back on track with my sleeping, alhamdulillah. It's still not perfect, I still struggle with 6 hours on a work night, but I'm getting there, and reading has definitely been a big reason why, so I'm very grateful for reading again. And the book that really started this all off is a book I feel like I'm going to treasure for the rest of my life and come back to time and time again. This is The 40 Rules of Love by Alif Shafak, and I will say this is the first time I've ever done a sort of like a book review. My name is Iqra, it does mean to read, coincidentally, and that's why I think reading's always been a big part of me, education's always been a big part of me. Please forgive me, if I'm not as concise or if I ramble a little bit. It's the first time I'm doing something like this, but I hope you enjoy it, and I would love to hear your thoughts down below. I know a lot of you guys have reached out to me on Instagram and said, oh, I've read that book before, I absolutely loved it, or I wanted to read this book. Please let me know what you think. So yeah, let's talk about this. So this is by a Turkish author, and when I found out she was Turkish, I was like, that makes so much sense, because the Turkish just have a way with their fiction and their storytelling and their directing. It's no secret that I've been obsessed with Ertugrul. I just finished season 4 last week, and that was one of the most stunning pieces of TV plot shows I've ever watched, and the fact that it's based on a real story is incredible. But I suppose I'll start there. Whilst Ertugrul is actually like an Islamic TV show, and it's designed to tell the real story of what's happened with the beginnings of the Ottoman Empire, but also obviously it is dramatized, but ultimately that is supposed to be an Islamic story. This is not, and when I was reading some reviews of this online, I think there's quite a few Muslim readers, maybe not quite a few, but there's a couple of Muslim readers who are a little bit wound up about the fact that this wasn't correct Islamically, and this was not showing the perception of, the love that you should have with Allah, to the love with other people, and blah 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 blah. And I think the author herself says this is not supposed to be an Islamic book. Okay, so we need to, as readers, especially as Muslim readers, like understand that not everything has to come from the Islamic perspective. But what I love about this is that there's 100% Islam woven into this. But I would call this much more of a spiritual book than a religious book. It is very, very spiritual. So the 40 Rules of Love, it makes you, just the title makes you think, it's going to be another romance, it's going to be a rom-com, going to be, you know, maybe something about like boy meets girl, that sort of thing. No, it's definitely not. There is romance in there, but it's not that sort of traditional stereotypical Romeo and Juliet story. So I'll just read you guys a blurb. Discover the 40 Rules of Love. Ella Rubinstein has a husband, 3 teenage children, and a pleasant home. Everything that should make her confident and fulfilled. Yet there is an emptiness at the heart of Ella's life, an emptiness once filled by love. So when Ella reads a manuscript about the 13th century Sufi poet Rumi and Shams of Tabriz and his 40 Rules of Life and Love, she is shocked out of herself. Turning her back on her family, she embarks on a journey to meet the mysterious author of this work. It is a quest infused with Sufi, mysticism and verse, taking Ella and us into an exotic world where faith and love are heartbreakingly explored. That blurb was enough for me to be like, I am so intrigued. And I'd heard about this book, you know, on other people's favourites videos or just recommendations. But I'm so happy that I ordered it. It's honestly one of the most compelling stories I've ever read. Now, it's actually 2 different tales running parallel alongside each other, as you can tell from the blurb. Part of the story is about Ella, and then part of the story is set in the 13th century. And what is so cool about this book is that it's told in the perspective of all the different characters within the book. So you have Ella's letters to Aziz, and you have Aziz's letters to Ella, and then you also have a little bit, you know, just about Ella herself in those chapters. And then when you get to the 13th century side, you have very short chapters. They're very like quick and easy to read, and they are titled by the person who's narrating it. So this one is the killer, this one is Shams, and this one is then back to Ella. So it does chop and change quite a bit, but it's quite easy to follow along. Now, I said in the intro that this book, I started reading it I think in June or July, probably July time, and I just finished it now in November. And that's not because I found it difficult to read, but it's because I really wanted to take it in, and I wanted to be reading it at a time when I felt like I was present and able to really absorb and enjoy the book. Now, as you can see from all these sticky notes, I've actually put loads of little notes in so I can go back to bits that I particularly loved. I talked about this book a little bit in my recent chit chat Get Ready With Me, and I said that this really explores the idea that love is the most fundamental emotion in the world. And when I say that, I don't say it lightly. I mean, to have a strong relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you have to have such a strong, intense love for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala first. And that's, part of that is like the teachings in the Quran. Like, we are taught that every single thing is given to us by Allah and is taken and is given back to Allah. So, you know, every single person in our life has been put on this earth because of God and will be sent back to God eventually when it's their time to go. The only thing that's consistent in our lives, the thing that we should be holding on to in the centre of our lives, is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the way you do that is through love. And that's my sort of main takeaway from this book, even though there's no real part of this book where they like sit and preach and say, oh, this is how you should live your life, and etc, etc. I'll get on to that. But the idea that love is so fundamental, that with love you are able to gain a closeness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that you wouldn't without this sort of divine sense of love. And it does make that love feel attainable, but I think you have to really drop a lot of societal standards and expectations and the way that like lots of people live their lives, and sort of when you look at the 40 rules, that's kind of how you are able to sort of understand the love better. And I don't think I'm doing a very good job of explaining this here. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go to one of the first little sticky notes I've got here, and I'm just going to read a little extract. So this is from one of the chapters that's narrated by Shams of Tabriz, and it says, there is a rule that suited my mood. Whatever happens in your life, no matter how troubling things might seem, do not enter the neighbourhood of despair. Even when all doors remain closed, God will open up a new path only for you. Be thankful. It is easy to be thankful when all is well. A Sufi is thankful not only for what he has been given, but also for all that he has been denied. So obviously that is just the essence of, with gratitude, you can get through anything in life. And in order to have gratitude, you have to love God. If you think about anyone that you're grateful towards, generally you love them. Like, you're grateful towards your parents for everything they've done for you. You might be grateful towards your siblings. You might be grateful for your friends. So the one that we should be the most grateful towards is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because without Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, like, we would have nothing and we would be nowhere. And not just the present moment of what we have and what we are, but the future, you know, the things that we hope for, the eternal life in the hereafter, that is all due to God. So when you look at this rule of, you know, no matter what happens in life, no matter how troubling things may become, don't enter into a state of despair, because Allah will always open up a path just for you. And you know, it's that tawakkul, that belief that, yeah, things are really hard right now. And things are really, really tough right now, but Allah is going to get me through this. When you seriously think about that and you truly believe that in your heart, you will be overcome with this intense love that I don't think, you know, any other thing in this world, no relationship, no spouse, no parent, no, you know, no friend could ever bring you. That's a promise from your Creator that we plan, but Allah plans, and Allah obviously knows the whole picture. We only know a small part of the picture. We only know what we're looking at. We're just mere mortals, right? Allah is the planner, and Allah knows best what's best for all of us. And I think, you know, I read one of the reviews of this and they said, you know, I wish that I had an understanding of the Arabic Quran. There's a lot of messages in here that are linked to the Quran, and that person was completely correct. A lot of the times when I was reading this book, it was reiterating things that I have learnt from, you know, studying the seerah of the Quran, or from listening to lectures from, you know, muftis and sheikhs and scholars. And it's like a reiteration of that in the most beautiful, poetic language. I think that's probably my favourite part of this book, was the 40 rules, because they were so relatable. Like, obviously this part of the story was set in the 13th century, but the rules are so relatable. And actually the person who is saying the rules, Shams, he is far from perfect, and you can see that in many, many ways, especially towards the end of the story. I'm not going to give any spoilers away, but he's a very, very flawed person. But his rules are essentially like what he has taken and learnt from the Quran Pak, and is then teaching the people around him, and Rumi, and obviously, like, that's written in this book. So like I said at the start, like, this is a fictional book. It's not meant to be an Islamic book, but despite the fact that it's not meant to be an Islamic book, for me it made me appreciate my faith in a different way. And it's not to say that I never, you know, I didn't appreciate my faith beforehand, but I just saw it in a different light, in a beautiful light, in a very mystical, spiritual light that just, it made me really emotional. Some parts of this, like, I just felt really, really emotional reading. This is another rule. Patience does not mean to passively endure. It means to be farsighted enough to trust the end result of the process. What does patience mean? It means to look at the dawn and see the rose, to look at the night and see the dawn. Impatience means to be so short-sighted as to not be able to see the outcome. The lovers of God never run out of patience, for they know that time is needed for the crescent moon to become full. Everything in life has a season, and there's a reason to everything that happens. And I know, you know, as much as you guys know, that sometimes it's incredibly difficult for us to understand the reason. And in the moment, we can't see the reason. Like, someone recently DM'd me on Instagram and she said, "Salam Iqra, I hope you're well. Please make dua for me, because my heart is completely broken right now. And I know there's a reason for this. I know there's a reason, but I cannot see it right now. And I'm so heartbroken. I don't know how I'm going to, you know, continue. I don't know, like, how I'm going to get through this. But please, can you keep me on du'as?" And I put up my story because, you know, hundreds of people view my story every day. So I thought, you know, maybe, like, at least a couple hundred of those people are going to be kind enough to stop in their day and just make a dua for that girl. And inshallah, her troubles are eased. But what shocked me about her message was that she said, you know, I know there is a purpose behind this struggle I'm going through, this heartbreak I'm going through. And I think that is so mature. There's such a strong emotional maturity in someone who can say that, because it's not easy to do that. And I think that this book is so, the way that it eloquently describes, like, so many things that we go through without specifically talking about the details, but we can relate to them and empathize with them and then apply them to our own lives. I just think it's beautiful the way it's written, and I just think there's so much that I personally took from this. Another life rule. The midwife knows that when there is no pain, the way for the baby cannot be opened and the mother cannot give birth. Right? So every single birth usually starts with contractions, and if there is no pain, the baby cannot come out yet, because the pain has to be there for the contractions to be there for the body to be ready to give birth. Likewise, for a new self to be born, hardship is necessary. Just as clay needs to go through intense heat to become strong, love can only be perfected in pain. Let me read that again. Just as clay needs to go through intense heat to become strong, love can only be perfected in pain. What I personally took from that line is that the way I'm looking at this love and the way that for me, like as soon as I started reading this book, like love, I straight away correlated like love with Allah. Love and Allah, okay? So for love to be perfected, for our love to be perfected with Allah, for that our relationship to be stronger with Allah, we have to go through pain. And that is so true. Like when you hear scholars speak, they say a lot of the times it takes a calamity or it takes a tragedy to happen in someone's life for them to start relying on God to the point where they are praying, they are doing zikr, they are constantly turning to the remembrance of God because that's the only thing that's giving them peace in their mind. And unfortunately, it took that terrible experience or that traumatic experience for that to happen. And so in the same way, when it's written that love can only be perfected in pain, the pain that we go through, there is always a purpose behind it, whether that is to teach us to appreciate what we've got, whether that is to bring us closer to God, whether that is to make us stronger in ourselves as individuals. There's always a purpose behind it. And I think that that's one of those lessons where you just learn like over time. You know, as you get older you learn. If you want to try and understand why, then you learn. The reality of this life is that it's imperfect. The reality of this life is that we're going to be tested with so many different trials, you know. And I feel like in my life, like alhamdulillah, I've not gone through like death of a very, very like a sibling or a parent, you know, like that kind of death. But I feel like in other ways I have been tested. I've been tested like with family, I've been tested with friends, I've been tested with work, with employment, with money, with my husband. Like there's been tests, but alhamdulillah, like some of them have been easier to get through than others. They've all ultimately led me to, when I come to the other side, to realise like, wow, I got through that because God got me here. Like Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala got me here. Like Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wanted me to go through that, so that now I'm able to like learn and process and heal and just be this version of myself, where then I can be so much more empathetic towards anyone else who might be going through a similar thing, or apply the lessons that I learned to help somebody else so that their journey's a little bit easier, you know. There's so much to be taken away, alhamdulillah, from all the lessons that we learn, but I think you have to be in a place of peace and understanding, and like you have to be like comfortable in yourself, and you have to want to be able to open up, you know, not even to as any other person, but just yourself. And I feel like this book really helped me to reflect on some of my hardships, but also so many of my blessings, you know. I just feel like although this is a fictional book and it's not intended to be an Islamic book, I feel like it just has like set a little flame, a light in my heart, and it just was so beautiful. Like there's bits that are just like completely taken aback, and the lessons in here are not necessarily revolutionary or groundbreaking, and ultimately, like, if you're familiar with the Quran Bag, if you've read the Quran Bag, or if you are constantly listening to lectures and if you're constantly trying to learn, then you're going to see a lot of that within this book. A lot of these rules I was like, let me just read that again and again and again, and like really try and absorb it and try and understand what it's saying. But yeah, I just think the way that it's written is incredibly beautiful, and there's so much purpose behind it as well. There's a lot of really awesome characters in here, and I love the fact that it's told from so many different characters' perspectives, because you've got female voices in here as well as male voices, especially the 13th century ones. I found them really interesting. Ella, I will say at times I found her a little bit frustrating. It's not really a spoiler, but basically her husband is cheating on her, and she is running this perfect house and making incredible meals and doing everything that she can as a mother and a wife, whilst knowing that her husband's cheating on her. And I just think maybe it's my attitude of like, I just would never put up with that I found her a bit frustrating that she was just accepting it. But as the book goes on and on and on, she, you know, gets to know Aziz, who is the author of the book within the book that we're reading. And, you know, she starts to understand that there's so much more to life than living the suburban sort of dream that everyone else around her thinks she's living. And then it also goes into like issues of, you know, the 21st century, like her daughter's really, really young and wants to get married, and she's like, oh my gosh, no, and, you know, her husband's cheating on it, like things like that. But then on the 13th century side, the characters in that book, like they also have very relatable characteristics too, some of them not so much, but it's so interesting to see and read from so many different perspectives. Like there's a drunk character who's like constantly like drinking in the tavern. There's just so many characters in here which are really interesting, and I did really enjoy that. I found Rumi within this book quite difficult to 100% understand. The premise is that he was a very, you know, he was Maulana, he was like a religious leader, he used to do lots of talks and people would come and visit him. He's married and he's got 2 boys and he's got an adopted daughter. But then when he meets Shams, he completely retreats away from the outside world and just becomes obsessed with Shams and learning from Shams, but like for the rest of the world it's very hard to kind of understand. So you kind of see him going on a journey, but I feel like I would have preferred for that to be a bit more in depth or explained a bit more. It's very mystical. You don't really know 100% what's going on with Rumi, but he just seems to, it's almost like Shams is like his soulmate, and not in a romantic form, but like he loves Shams so much and Shams brings so much to him. So yeah, that part I found a little bit confusing, but I feel like if I read it again and again I'd get more from it, if that makes sense. I don't love the way this book ended. One of the characters in the 13th century part, it was very, very heartbreaking. And then for like the characters, you know, on Ella's side, I didn't like how it ended. I would have preferred a happier ending, to be honest with you. The ending left me feeling quite sad. But the depth of the book, the core of the book, the main part of the book, I just absolutely loved it. And like I said, it's going to be one of those books that I will visit time and time again. I will read again and again. I've taken notes on. Just think it's such a beautiful, beautiful, amazing book. So I would give it 5 stars out of 5. Obviously, like I'm no like expert with doing reviews and things like that on books, but definitely 5 stars. Absolutely, really did truly enjoy it. And I just wanted to say, like, I've got so many books here and they're just such a wide range of books. And then I also don't just want to read like fiction books like this. I'm also going to be reading like self-help books, financial books, Rich Dad Poor Dad. I'm reading that at the moment. I'm reading this book right now, oh my gosh, and it's just so, I'm so like in 2 minds as to whether I should carry on reading it or not. But I kind of just want to read it and share it with you guys. Might do like 2 shorter videos on that. This is quite a long video. I think this is coming up to about 30 minutes. So if you guys enjoy this, then definitely let me know. I will do more of this. Either way, whether I make these videos or not, I am going to be reading a lot more. It helps me, you know, with my sleep, and it helps me to grow as a person, and it helps me to switch off from social media, which I've talked about this before. As much as I love social media, I just feel like sometimes it's the biggest stump of our growth, both intellectually, mentally, and sometimes even physically. Like you can just sit there for hours scrolling and scrolling. So yeah, I'm gonna keep on reading, and I would love it if you guys could leave your comments down below on what you thought of this book if you've read it already. What books you are currently reading as well, if there's any recommendations you have for me, because I am always looking for, you know, good books to read, and I think I'll do this more often, hopefully, fingers crossed. I'm going to be trying to hopefully finish books off quicker as well, because there's no excuse really. We all have time in the day where we can either choose Netflix or reading, and I think I'm going to try and go for reading a little bit more often. If you did enjoy it, then definitely hit thumbs up so I know, and I'll make more of these in the future. And I will see you in my next one. Take care, guys. Bye!